Hi, everyone. I'm Carla Johnson. And a couple of years ago, I read a book called Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. And something that he talked about really struck a chord with me. And it was this idea of needing actual physical space to create. So this actually changed the entire way that I set up my office. I had a big U-shaped executive desk, and I got rid of it and I bought two standing desks. One was my digital desk where I have my laptop and my screen and my phone and things like that. And then the other one, I call it my analog desk. And I don't have any electronics on it at all. But I do have a lot of paper, a lot of pens, a lot of markers, a lot of Post-it notes, things like that. And what I found is that designating a specific place that I knew, that my brain knew I could go to be creative, was one thing that immediately put my brain into that creative mode. Now, it's something that got me thinking about how do we actually do this in the environment of corporations when we need to be able to have not just physical space like I was able to create, but that mental space to be creative thinkers, to be innovative thinkers, and to start with some trial and error with ideas. And I think that there's nobody who knows this idea more about how to create space for innovation than my guest today, Malin Liden. And this is the show, Connect the Dots, where Malin and I are going to dig into where she finds inspiration for a lot of her ideas, and then connects the dots into the work that she does and how she looks at rolling that out into measurable results. And we're especially going to talk about that today. So I would like to welcome Malin to the show. She's the head of EMEA marketing and transformation for SAP. And she's responsible for actually architecting the roadmap that supports SAP's long-term growth. Now, in the development stages of all of her plans, one thing that really reigns true is the importance of people and the importance of giving people space to do the work that we need to do to be innovative. So welcome to Connect the Dots, Malin.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure and honor to be here on the show.
It's so great to meet you because I know, or to see you again. And I know this is your evening. And are you in Germany today, Berlin?
I am. So it's at the end of my work day. And so now I get to enjoy.
There you go. Well, I'm going to start out our conversation with something to just set the bar and level set everything about what we talk about. Give me your definition of innovation.
Yeah. You know what? Thank you for asking that. I often argue that innovation is an abused word. It's a little bit like transformation, innovation. It sounds super cool, so we use it for everything. And I find that we use it a lot for incremental improvements. But that to me is not innovation. Innovation is something that is new, that is disruptive, that is making people open their eyes and maybe see things in a new way. And I like to use, when I talk about this definition, I like to use this old picture that I'm sure everyone knows, there where there's someone who is trying to pull a cart up a hill and the wheels are squared. And then there's somebody standing there with the round wheels and saying, look, I have a better idea. And the guys who are pulling the cart up are saying, no, I'm too busy. I actually don't have time for you. This is what innovation should be. It should be something that is so new that people are looking at it and saying, that's really weird. So I actually had the opportunity to lead innovation teams, and I always told them, if people don't think that we are a little bit crazy, then we are not pushing the envelope far enough.
I like that definition, and I've never seen that cartoon, but it makes sense when we think about people saying, there's another way to look at this, and everybody in the company with the square wheels is saying, this is how we've always done it, right?
And that's why it's so difficult to do innovation, right? Because it means that by definition, I actually found that this was an interesting observation when I had the opportunity to lead an innovation team. Everyone thought it was super cool. Everyone was jealous of me. And I was like, oh, I was also really happy. This is very glamorous. It was not glamorous because by definition, people look at you as the odd one out, as the weird one with a really idea. And you need to be comfortable with that. I think, normally, in a corporate environment, you don't make a career by people looking at you as the weird one. But if you want to innovate, then that's also a culture topic to create an environment where it's safe and where it's actually looked upon as something positive. If you're different, if you have weird ideas, if you are presenting things that feel really out of the normal for people.
Mm-hmm. How do you, because you've led innovation in so many different ways in areas within SAP, how do you balance that tension with people between, I mean, because there are a lot of people who want to try something new, but they don't want to be that odd duck,
Yeah.
and they don't want to stick their neck out too far because of the, perceived consequences. How do you manage that tension?
I think you have to approach it from a few different sides. So first of all, feeling stupid is also important sometimes. If you don't feel stupid, you're not really learning, but it's not a comfortable feeling. Failing is also not a comfortable feeling, but you need to fail if you want to innovate. So first of all, if you fail individually or if you feel stupid individual, it's worse. So the first thing you can do is to make sure that you create this team environment where it's this, we are in this together. And you're strengthening the team by making sure that people don't feel exposed. If they feel stupid, if they have a weird idea, then it's not my idea, it's actually our idea. So if people think that we are weird, at least we are weird together. It can be also cool. If you're weird together, it can also get a positive touch to it. So I think that's one thing, to strengthen people by putting them together. But you also really need to create this I would say, I call it entrepreneurial spirit, because if you only do weird things, then you really become like an odd bird in the company. So you have to also portfolio manage when you do innovation. There is nothing wrong with incremental improvements. Sometimes it can be incredibly valuable. And if you put all your eggs in one basket on the weird things, then it's exhausting for people. Many of the weird things might end up just being weird, and it doesn't become the breakthrough, really great innovation idea. So you need to also balance and give people some things where you feel like this is a rather safe bet. It's a good improvement. It's a good investment to make. It's definitely an improvement. Maybe not the most breakthrough innovation, but something new that is going to help us. And if you balance the portfolio of projects to try to manage towards a portfolio that gives people also moments of success, where you can also celebrate, that also strengthens people and makes them more brave and comfortable in those situations where this is the big idea that we're betting on. It is a little bit weird, but it could be the really, really big thing.
I like your idea of a portfolio of projects and almost a range of levels of innovation. If you looked at the riskiness of them, or the weirdness factor. I think it's a great litmus to see, are we really challenging our own expectations? What are we willing to put out there and try, and how experimental are we? But also, to your point, not everything has to be completely disruptive, completely weird, because there are so many advantages that come from just little incremental innovations, like innovations in small ways, and having the mindset that everybody can be an innovator if they just understand what to do. Yeah, they just understand
absolutely. And it gives people a safe place to start as well. If you start on something that is more an incremental improvement, then you might be able to push someone in that direction where they become more and more brave and say, this was fun, this was rewarding. I try something maybe a little bit more adventurous next time. But essentially, it's like going on the stock market. You don't buy only the high risk items. Might win big, but you might also go wrong.
It's true, but we have a completely different attitude than when it comes to ideas and what we expect to either work or be perfect the first time. I was talking to an executive the other day, and he was telling me one of the things that he has seen work really, really well in his company is that when somebody comes forth with a new idea, there is one. I don't know if they made this an official mandate, but one of the practices that they have is that they always say something positive about the idea. And sometimes it's just as simple as saying, this was a really tough topic, and the fact that you came up with an idea to address it is really something to be celebrated. And he pointed out that doing that over a longer period of time really gave people more confidence and made them feel less vulnerable when it comes to sharing ideas. What have you seen in both in SAP and other companies that you've seen or worked with or observed that really helps facilitate that feeling of not feeling so exposed and vulnerable, whether it's an individual, because we're going to talk more about people here in a minute, or teams in general, and having them feel that it's okay to start taking some of these greater risks?
Absolutely. And I love that idea. I think the energy, or the going in with a positive attitude, welcoming ideas, I think is great. And the way we talk, the language that we use is hugely important. And so you're also touching on leadership, right? There is a huge task on the leadership side to create this safe environment. And I tried something in my innovation team, because I was really telling them to, like I said before, if people don't think we're a bit crazy, we're not pushing the envelope far enough. And so I really push them to come up with more ideas, and some of them are not great, right? And it means that you also have to encourage people to talk about failure. Failure is not nice. It's so easy to say, oh, failure is the new black, and it's a fail fast and learn fast. There are all these Silicon Valley type of language. That sounds really, really brilliant. But when you're failing, it doesn't feel so good. Nobody likes to fail. And what I try to position with my team is to say, failure is a little bit like feeling stupid. I worked once for a really senior executive, and I felt stupid a lot because he was very senior and he was very smart. And I said to him once, you know what, Jonathan, since I started working for you, I have never felt stupid so often. And he was a bit shocked. He was like, oh, I'm really sorry. I don't think you're stupid. I wouldn't have hired you if I thought you were stupid. But actually, I meant it in a different way. Since I worked for him, it's a flag for me. If I don't feel stupid often, then I'm not learning. I'm too comfortable. I'm in my comfort zone. So for me, it's a warning signal. And that has totally turned around my sentiment around feeling stupid. And I used the same analogy for the team that I was managing, the innovation team, to say failure is the price we pay for learning. And if we pay a price, I'm an economist, so I think in money, right? If I pay a price, I want the most value of it. And where do you get the most value of a failure is if you really take the time to maybe analyze it together, to share it with others, to actually talk about it, even though maybe in the first instance it can feel comfortable. We like to talk about our successes. But if as a leader you encourage people to share the learnings from failures, then all of a sudden it becomes something that it has a positive touch. It was the price we paid, but the value that we got for the price is the learning. And if we can share the learning, we start in our own team because it's a safer environment, but then we share learnings with the larger organization. And then we pay back to the organization for giving us the safe environment. We give the learnings back and we gain something as an organization. And if you couple that then with also the reward, I remember still very well the first team member that came to me and said, can I have a slot in our all hands because I want to share a failure with the team? And I said, yes, now I made it. And I made a big deal out of it. I made him look like the total superstar when he did that. And that encourages others to follow.
I love that. That's fabulous. And I think the fact that he came forward and said that to you is a huge reflection of the comfort that you had created in that environment.
I was so happy.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk a little bit about a report that I saw that came out from Gartner yesterday. It's called The Role of Marketing in Digital Transformation and Innovation. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of statistics in here that I found really interesting that I wanted us to talk about for a little bit. And Alex, the magic behind the scenes of the Connect the Dots show, she's going to put up a couple of the statistics that were in the report. And this is the first one about CMOs see innovation as a path to growth despite budget challenges, and that they aggressively invest in innovation programs. And I think this is an important one as we go into the second slide that we'll talk about in just a couple of minutes. And this is why I had asked you to define innovation to start with, because I think it makes a big difference as we talk about CMOs and the path to innovation, because I think there's, as you said, a lot of abuse around the word. Yeah. And I think that can make a difference in how much and what CMOs invest in. What did you think when you saw this particular piece, this graph from the chart?
Yeah, I think it's also a challenge. Innovation can be so big. Normally, maybe we think about innovation like doing something creative in a new way, but innovation in my environment, in our environment, is a lot of digital innovation as well. How do we use technology in different ways? And so for me, it was a bit surprising to just see a slightly increase. There are huge opportunities, and I've seen in our company and also in a lot of the other companies how much companies have invested in digital, especially when it comes to marketing and communications. It has forced us to think in different ways about how we communicate with our customers, with our partners, with the markets. And so that's why I was actually quite surprised that it was not even more of an increase of investment, because again, it comes back to the constraints. I don't know if you know the book, A Beautiful Constraint. It's one of my favorites.
I don't. Beautiful Constraint.
It's a reading tip. It's a reading tip. And it really talks about how sometimes big budgets can be a problem, because it makes it feel really easy. You can outsource, you can ask someone else to come up with the idea, you can ask for something cool. The more constraints you have, the more creative you have to become. And I think this is also what we see in many areas, that companies are under pressure. The competitive landscape is really tough. Yeah? So you have to do more with less. So we certainly also feel this way. We have to always optimize, do more with less. And there is an investment that you have to make there, especially in the digital environment, that allows you to do that. And I've seen that happen with the pandemic as a catalyst for this development. So I was surprised to see that it was not an even higher share of investment here. But maybe it comes back to what you said. It depends on what you call innovation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes perhaps what teams are trying to bring forward as innovation maybe isn't recognized as a CMO as that effort. And I wanted to share Espen's comment here. And thank you for joining us, Espen. And his question is, do you have any suggestions on how to approach and present an idea for your leader? I think that's a fabulous question, because I hear it all the time from teams. Should one put in all the effort to make a finished product, to do a formal keynote presentation or so forth? What's your recommendation? Like, what has worked for you? And then what have you seen work?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. And we're actually investing quite a lot at SAP in this skill, because it is a skill. Yeah, we put in a lot of effort in presenting things to our customers, but when it comes to innovation, you have to sell a dream. Because again, think about this concept of, if you have a big idea, if it's real innovation, then it's a bit weird, it's a bit hard to understand because it doesn't exist. Right? You're suggesting something completely new, which means that you have to pitch like in a TEDx style format. So I would not do a keynote presentation or to over prepare. I would really start with storytelling to really pitch the idea from the perspective of who is it going to benefit? Why are we doing this? What are we hoping to accomplish? How will we, if we implement this, make the person on the other side feel? If you can transport that feeling to make them feel like this is the gain for us, for the customer, whoever the innovation is from, then they start to also feel like they are part of the idea. If you present something that is too finished, too polished, especially if it's disruptive, they will feel like, oh, I don't know about that. Take them on a journey. Use storytelling, sell what you want to accomplish, and invite them to be part of, let them feel like they are also shaping this idea together with you.
I like that. And my friend Andrew Davis, he's a master at pitching ideas. He used to work in TV. And he said one of the things that he sees work really well is that when you pitch the idea, give people enough so they get the sense of what it is you're trying to do, but let them help finish out that idea, because then you're co-creating it. And people like to see things succeed that they help contribute to.
Definitely. And one thing that I always told my team to, and I don't know, maybe it's also, I live in Germany, we're quite detail focused, so people talk with a lot of detail. And I had I actually worked this was a really great school for me. I worked for the CMO of SAP for a couple of years, and I saw a lot of people pitching to him. And sometimes people start in the beginning of times, and they start to tell a long story, and then after we know this research, right? People have the attention span of goldfish. So if you save your thunder to somewhere later on, then people will have gone to, to find better weather somewhere else. You need to go in with the killer, really start strong and then back it up with, and a lot of people, I think, turn it around a little bit and start to explain why did they come to this idea, how did it come about, but really start with going in with the thunder to amaze people at the beginning, and then they will listen to you for the rest.
I absolutely agree. And I'm a huge fan of storytelling. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate that you bring up that part of innovation, because I think that ability to tell the idea of a story and what inspired your idea, how it can, connect the dots into the work that you're doing and why the idea matters and can have impact, and then back it up with the evidence that you have. I think that's really important. I wanted to go on to another chart that was in this research report from Gartner, and Alex is going to share that. And that's about the CMO's investment in innovation compared with the rest of the organization. And I think innovation is something that I would say is somewhat new to the marketing organization. And do you feel that they're playing catch up, or what do you think the story behind this chart really is here, Malin?
I was also a little bit surprised about this one, I have to say, but I think it maybe also has to do with By definition, marketing is a creative discipline. So possibly we have been innovating without calling it innovation. We've been pushing the envelope. We've been creating new concepts, new ways of communicating with the market. But what has changed now is the digital transformation. Marketing has been a huge accelerator. And here we can see, I think it was also mentioned in the Gartner report somewhere, which was another report that I read, where you can see that even quite mature companies, big companies, have a lot of catching up to do when it comes to digital marketing, profiling people, knowing more about the customers before the first touch, adjusting to this push versus pull. It's almost like we're going from being hunters, marketing and sales, we're hunting after the audience, and we're trying to call them as many times as possible, send as many emails as possible, and sometime they will give in. No, they are not giving in. If you're hunting someone and running after them, what happens is they turn around and run as fast as they can in the other direction. And pull marketing, which is what we have to do now, also especially here in Europe with the legal requirement, GDPR, and it's coming to the rest of the world too, right? We're protecting people from this type of hunting, which means that we need to become farmers in the communication. We need to make ourselves interesting enough so that people in their own buyers-led journeys, where they decide where to go next, that they will find us, and that what they find about us is interesting, not just being persistent and forcing them in our direction, but actually farming something that is so nice that they want to come and they want to stay.
Well, and I think that's an interesting thing about what happens with content marketing, is that it really is an innovative approach, not just to marketing, but to business in general. And looking at that, it's the perfect example of a farmer versus a hunter, because building that long-term relationship through content that supports whatever it is that your audience is looking for is the perfect way to bring them in by being helpful and giving them the kind of content that they're looking for. And I think the idea of content marketing isn't necessarily recognized as innovative, but I think it's the perfect example of finding inspiration from someplace else and bringing it into the work that people do. And I look at the things that people like Amanda Todorovic from the Cleveland Clinic has been able to do with her content team, which started out just with her as a single individual. Wow. And she's built it. I don't know. I swear every time I turn around, she's hiring another 10 or 20 people. But and even the data she's been able to extract because of the interaction with content, it is highly innovative. And we look at what it's meant to their digital transformation as a healthcare system and how they've really set the standard, not just for other hospitals and healthcare systems in the US, but around the world and for industries in general. And I think those are things that maybe marketers don't recognize in our own work about the innovative things that we're doing, and don't necessarily recognize ourselves as the innovators in an organization.
Absolutely. And when you talk about content, I think this is also, you're touching on something really important. It takes courage also to innovate. And sometimes if I look at content innovation, it's also being brave enough to pull yourself out of the discussion a little bit and orchestrate a conversation that matters between the users. User-generated content that we have not put together ourselves, where it says we are the best things in sliced bread, but actually letting people have a real conversation. That takes courage, but that is what people are interested in. If it's too polished, if it looks too nice, then it's boring. It's like I was actually quite intimidated when I looked at the number of your Twitter followers. So you have a huge followers. You know this already. But there are people who go on Twitter and they only share like the approved corporate content, and it's a little bit boring. It can be informative, but it's also a bit boring. What really works in social media and with content in general, so Twitter is actually a good playground to test these type of things, is a real conversation, something that's honest, that feels authentic. And that takes maybe not always a huge creative brain or a total innovation process to come up with. It actually takes mostly courage.
Yeah, I agree. And that's an interesting example, because last week I shared a post on LinkedIn about, it was actually a quote I had seen the evening before at my kids' open house for their high school. And it was from their Spanish teacher, that said, do you know what a foreign accent is? It's a sign of bravery. And I thought that was such a powerful quote. And I know that when we lived in Spain, and I'm still learning the Spanish language, and you think about all of these things that you put out there. And, I told a little story about my experience, and that was something that was highly interacted with and responses in both that way. And I think that interaction from that perspective is really interesting. There was a couple of other things, and I won't put the charts up because it looks like they're black for some people. But in the positives about the state of marketing innovation from this Gartner report, there were three things. There were processes, in that 96% of CMOs have a defined process for innovation management, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I think that can be part of the chaos. This second one, I was over the moon to hear. 95% of CMOs say they have a dedicated headcount for innovation initiatives, which to me says they're creating that space, at least in part, for people to have innovation. And then the third was culture. And that's 93% agree that their organizations will fund high-risk initiatives. How do you see, do you agree with these statistics?
I'm also surprised, actually, but happily surprised, that the numbers are so high. Yeah, I think that's brilliant, because you do need to set aside a little bit. It's like in our world in marketing, we call it MSO. We need to create marketing sourced opportunities. And if your KPIs are really hard on that, it takes also the courage to take budget out of something that you don't know if it's going to deliver. You are risking your results, what you're measured on at the end of the year. So what I really like about this is to say, there is somewhere in the organization, there is an entity, and it doesn't mean like that only. I think this is an important distinction. It doesn't mean that only these dedicated headcount, they are only responsible for innovation. Where it really works well is when they provide the processes and the platforms, and also the sandbox, if you will, for people everywhere in the organization. Coming back to culture, if you have a focus on culture that produces ideas and encourages ideas, but then you also have to give it space. I actually have a community at SAP that I'm really proud of, called the SAP Digital Tribe, and it's the 3rd birthday today. So happy birthday!
Yay! Happy birthday! We should have brought cake.
This is a community that is set up for that purpose. And what we did here, we put together people from across the world who are just interested in digital marketing, in innovating together, learning together, being curious together. And we have sponsors who have also set aside budget for formats such as the Shark Tank or Dragon's Dens, or they are called different things in different cultures, right? But you have a competition where you can pitch ideas, and if the idea, if you're able to pitch it well, then you get the sponsorship, senior marketing sponsorship, and the budget to actually execute the ideas. And then again, we use this digital tribe community network to also make sure that this doesn't become an innovation island. But if it works out really well, then we scale it also over the network, so that we, again, as an organization, get more return on the investment. But to create these type of both the networks where people feel safe to innovate together, where you're not going to be judged if it doesn't work out, but you have an opportunity to bring it forward and to get support for it, and also see it scale across an entire organization, that is very rewarding for people. So, yeah.
It is. I think it's that feeling of progress, that they put something forth, something happened, and now they can see what else happened because of it. Because if people bring forth ideas and collaborate in that way because they want to see something happen on the outcome. Now that brings us to an interesting, the last statistic that I'll share from this Gartner research, when talking about people want to see the outcomes, is that the two challenges that CMOs talked about was measurement and results. 91% struggled to measure the impact of innovation, and 83% say that innovation has not delivered to management's expectations. What do you think about that? Yeah, it's a big ouch, especially when the positives felt so positive.
Exactly.
And then to turn around and not be able to measure or show results for the work that's being invested in.
Yeah. No, that hurts to see, because you're happy that they are investing, that they're creating the environment, but then they are not getting the return, and so you wonder, then is the investment going to continue? And I think there are a couple of things. I mean, first of all, it's evident if you don't think about how you're going to measure it going into the exercise, no wonder you can measure it later on. It needs to be at the start of the exercise to know what is it that how are you going to measure success? What is it that is going to show? What does success look like at the end of the process? So I think sometimes people pass over that step a little bit because it's not as glamorous. Maybe it's not as it doesn't feel as interesting to be part of. But
just say it. It's a drag, Malin. It's a drag.
It is a drag, yes. And it's also difficult, of course, because if it's breakthrough innovation, if it's something new, how do you benchmark? How do you know if it was successful? You have nothing to compare with. So you have to be really creative again in thinking about how can you make it measurable? How can you make it relevant to the people who are also holding the budgets? But I think the second thing that I've observed in my many years in this environment is also patience is a virtue. And for ambitious people like us, patience is difficult. And oftentimes innovation, at least in a corporate environment, to do something new really takes time. The idea is one thing, and to develop it is one thing, to roll it out is one thing. But until you've penetrated an organization and the idea actually has gotten a chance to deliver, it can take time. And oftentimes we are not patient enough to create a stable environment for people. They start to innovate on something, and all of a sudden there is a change, or the organization changes, or the executive or the sponsor goes somewhere else and maybe leaves the company or another part of the company. And all of a sudden the direction is different, or it becomes something like not invented here, and I have another idea. And this is also a danger for results in innovation. You need to also make sure that even with these shifts that we have, that's why I like this community that I was talking about so much. It's a marketing community that is completely irrespective of any type of organizational boxes. So people stay together for longer. The relationships remain, but also the innovations and the projects that people work on remain through organizational changes and shifts, or sometimes just the general impatience of a quarter, the quarterly pace that we are in. So I think that there are a couple of things that might explain that, but I think it is the homework of starting by really spending as much innovation energy on how we are going to measure the success as on the innovation itself, and then also giving it the time and the space. We were talking about space in the beginning, but also giving the innovation idea the space and the time to actually have to be able to generate the results.
I love that. I heard a speaker say one time, if we think back in history, we think about when the Wright brothers had their first successful flight, and we think, voila, flight suddenly came about. But really, when you talk about patience, it was, I don't know, 3 or 5 years later, there was a newspaper article where somebody was talking about the potential of flight. And the reporter said, well, there's a couple of guys down in the Carolinas doing some things that look kind of interesting. I think we'll have to wait and see what that looks like. And there's too many times when we don't give patience its due justice in the innovation process.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, Malin, you are a Swedish native living in Germany, obviously a very global outlook on not just innovation, but the world in general. Where do you go when you are looking for inspiration? What inspires you?
You know what? I'm a country girl, and so
I look like it. I'm looking at your background, and there's plants everywhere.
Exactly. Nature is a huge inspiration for me. I live close to the forest, and so I just go out into the forest. And actually, this is one of my tips that might sound a little strange, where sometimes people ask, how do you support innovation with a team? I always say, dare to be bored. There are very few opportunities nowadays to be bored because we have attention grabbers everywhere, distractions everywhere. But going outside or doing something where your mind can wander is super important. And for me, it's the forest. I go to the forest, I get energy from the environment around me. And it's also just, I don't have my smartphone. I just walk and my mind can wander. That's a huge inspiration for me. But the other thing is also to invite people from totally different disciplines. Someone who is a brain or psychologist, or someone who is an astronaut. We've had guests on team calls. Invite someone who could not be more different from you. Is a huge source of inspiration. It gives you completely different ideas, and it challenges often also your way of thinking. So find someone from a completely different culture. We've had environmental activists in some of the calls that I was part of, and they have another drive, another spirit, and than what we are used to in the corporate environment. Bringing very different people together is a really great way for me to get both energy, but also inspiration and new ideas. So
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for joining me on Connect the Dots today. I know people are going to want to connect with you and also follow your work. How can people do that? Where can they find you?
LinkedIn. I am drinking my social champagne. I led a social selling initiative. I'm a social addict. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. Thank you for pulling that up. And I would love if people reached out and connected, because I think this is also how we can give each other inspiration and ideas. So looking forward.
I agree. Thank you so much, Malin, for joining us on this episode of Connect the Dots. And for everyone else, thank you for joining me. I encourage you to tune in next week or to follow me on YouTube and click the little bell so that you can subscribe and see whenever we have a new episode of Connect the Dots. If you are looking to become a better innovator, I highly recommend that you follow Malin's advice. Start your innovation program, your project, your portfolio with a clear objective and know what it is that you're looking for on the outset. Look at how you can become a much better storyteller about the ideas that you're putting forth. And then last, have patience. Great things take time, and so do great ideas. The only difference between a good idea and a great idea is time. I'm Carla Johnson. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Connect the Dots, and I'll see you next time.